everybody! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. It's April, so it's time for the next installment in our 2019 folk art calendar blanket. And this month, we're going to plant some trees. This month's sequence of appliques is this really fun little tree project. We're going to show you a couple of variations so you can change up the way your trunks look and the way your treetops look. And it's a great opportunity to do a little stash diving and jump on top of some of those scraps that have been accumulating. You can make your trees a whole bunch of different shades of green, or really whatever color you want. Maybe you like the look of a fall forest with all those beautiful golds and reds and oranges, or maybe you like a really bright green like an early spring, or possibly all the deep, rich greens of a deep summer. You can vary them up. You can try using some variegated yarns like I have here. Pretty much just a nice excuse to go wild with the colors for your forest. You can do the same thing with your tree trunks too. You can vary up the shades of brown, maybe experiment with some variegated, whatever your stash might have on offer. I'm also going to get into talking a little bit how you might want to experiment with different textures and different sizes of yarn a little later on, but we will get to that in good time. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, grab our blankets too. We'll head on over to the craft table and we will stitch up an entire forest together. In order to make our little tree appliques, you want approximately 3 or 4 grams per color per tree, or around 10 or 11 yards of green and 10 or 11 yards of brown for each tree that you make. I'm using an acrylic size 4 medium yarn for this project. It's the same yarn I've been using throughout the entire blanket. However, if you've got some acrylic size 5 chunky or acrylic size 6 bulky yarn lying around in green or brown or both, you might want to experiment with that as well, because the different textures and size of the yarn will lend a little more of an organic or a natural look to your trees, and it'll make your forest look a little more interesting. So feel free to experiment with some of the different sized and textured yarns that you might have in your stash. Just be sure that they're the same fiber type as the rest of your blanket. You're going to need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and the same hook as we've been using all along, a 5.5 millimeter or an I or a 9 in the US, size 5 in the UK. Be sure to use the same hook no matter what size of yarn you're using. That will keep your stitches relatively the same. And if you haven't already subscribed to our show, be sure to hit that button and the bell so you never miss another episode of our calendar blanket series. And once you've got all this together, we can get started. Visit our shop and purchase a pattern. You'll help support our show. And we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. We have 2 different kinds of trees that we're going to demonstrate in today's tutorial. So there's 2 different tree tops and 2 different tree trunks. The first one is perfectly round, nice and simple. The other one is a little bit more natural looking, so it's got almost a bit of a rounded triangular shape. Then you've got a very plain trunk, which is just sort of straight up and down on both sides, and the other trunk has a little limb. And depending on which way you lay your trunk down, it's a fully reversible piece. You can have your little limbs to the left or to the right, or mix and match. And the more you mix and match these pieces, the more natural your deciduous forest will look. We're going to start with the top, so let's grab our green yarn and get started. We're going to begin with a cinch circle. Once you've chained 1 to secure your circle, you're going to chain 2 more. This chain 3 for row 1 will count as a double crochet. You're going to double crochet 11 into your cinch circle, so 11 double crochets. Make sure you're working over top of your short tail because we want to be able to cinch the circle shut when we're done. Once you have 11 more double crochets worked into your cinch circle, plus the chain 1, that equals, or should say plus the chain 3, that equals 12. Grab your short tail, cinch it up nice and tight, and we're going to join to the top of the chain 3 with a slip stitch. So find the top of that chain 3 and stick your hook in there. I'm going to work over top of my short tail. Join with a slip stitch. So you should have something that looks like this now. For row 2, we're going to chain 3 to begin, but this chain 3 will not count as a double crochet. We are going to skip it when we get back round to it, and I'll show you what to do when we get there. We're going to double crochet into the same stitches joining. So if you pull up on that chain 3, you see that little space that shows up there? That's where you're going to put your hook. So you double crochet into the same stitch that you chained 3 out of. And now you're going to work 2 double crochet into each stitch all the way around. So that first one looks a bit funny. It's like a bit almost like it's cut in half. So make sure you get that one. That's the first stitch that you want to work your 2 double crochet into. And if it's a little tight, that's okay. So do double crochet into each stitch all the way around. You will get all the way back to the beginning. So this is the last place that you work your 2 double crochet into. This is the false stitch right here. We are going to use it, but not with 2 double crochets. So when you get back to that point, pause and I'll catch up with you there. At the end of row 2, when you get all the way back to that false stitch, make sure you've worked 2 double crochet into the last stitch just before it. If you were to count your chain 3, you'd have 24 stitches, but we're going to skip it. So we're going to work a double crochet into that false stitch. So 1 double crochet into the false stitch. This is the stitch that sits at the base of the chain 3. Looks something like that. We're going to skip the chain 3. Instead, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of the first real double crochet. This will continue to give you 24 stitches. So it just pushes the chain 3 to the back, but it makes it a nice solid couple of rounds. Row 3, this is where we're going to diverge a bit. So you can decide if you want to make the fully round tree. In the event that you want to make the fully round tree, you are just going to use the double crochet stitch throughout. So every time you hear me saying numbers, you're going to use the same numbers, but you're only going to use the double crochet stitch if you want to make a fully round tree, kind of like the first 3 rows of the sun applique we did. And if you want to make the tree that's a little bit more organic, I'm going to demonstrate that one as we go. So remember, if you make the fully round tree, you're going to use double crochets throughout. If you're going to make the organic looking one like me, watch what I do. We are all going to chain 3 to begin. And we are all going to double crochet into the same stitches joining. So if you pull up, you see that little stitch there, that's where you're going to double crochet. And we are all going to double crochet once into the next stitch. Now, if you're making the fully round tree, continue to use the double crochet stitch, but use the same numbers. And for the rest of us making an organic looking tree, we're going to now switch to the half double crochet stitch. So into the next stitch, we're going to work 2 half double crochets. Remember, if you're making the fully round one, these are double crochets for you, but you're still using 2 of them. And 1 half double crochet into the next stitch. Again, if you're making the fully round tree, that's a double crochet, but just 1 of them. Into the next stitch, 2 single crochet. Again, if you're making the fully round one, you're using the double crochet stitch, but you're putting in 2. And into the next stitch, a single crochet. So it's the same numbers, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way around if you're using the double crochet stitch. So if you're going to make a fully round tree, off you go. It's just 2, 1, 2, 1, double crochets all the way around. I'll see you back at the beginning. For the rest of us, we're going to continue with these little strange oblong shapes. So we started with doubles, we moved to halves, now we're into singles. We're moving back to half double crochets. So 2 half double crochet into the next stitch. And a half double crochet into the stitch after that. So we're still using the 2, 1, 2, 1 stitch count all the way around. We're just changing the kinds of stitches we use to give us a little bit more of an undulating edge. So that was half double crochets. We're back to doubles now. 2 double crochet into the next stitch. And a double crochet into the stitch after that. So every set is the same kind of stitch, but you're going to change from doubles to halves to singles to half to double, half, single, etc. After doubles come halves, so 2 half double crochet into the next stitch, half double crochet once into the stitch after that. We're going down, so we're into singles now, 2 single crochet into the next stitch, and a single crochet into the next stitch. After we've come all the way down, we want to go back up again. So we go back to half double crochet, 2 half double crochet into the next stitch, half double crochet into the stitch after that, and then we're back up to doubles again, 2 double crochet into the next stitch, and a double crochet into the stitch after that. So the next will be half, 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 single, 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 half, 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 and then that'll bring us back to the false stitch. The last 2 stitches, or I should say the last stitch you would have worked if you're making the oblong shaped one, is a half double crochet. If you're making a fully circular treetop, it would be of course a double crochet, but we are all going to work a double crochet into the false stitch. So into the false stitch, 1 double crochet no matter what kind of treetop you're working. That brings us back to the very beginning. We're going to skip over top of the chain 3, join with a slip stitch to the top of the first real double crochet, and then you're going to fasten off. You're going to leave yourself a nice long tail because you want to be able to sew down the top of your tree. So every time you make a tree top, make sure you fasten off a nice long tail for sewing. And now we can make ourselves a couple of trunks. Now the trunks. We have a very normal straight up and down one, and then we have one that has a little limb off to the side. So they're both built relatively the same way, but there's one little change up if you want to add the limb. And when we get to it, I will point it out. So let's grab our brown yarn and make a trunk. We're going to begin with a slip knot. And we're going to chain 16, so that's 1, 6, 16. Don't chain them too tight. Try not to chain them too loosely. Nice, even 16 chains. Once you have 16 chains, make sure they haven't twisted on you. And row 1 is exactly the same for us no matter what kind of trunk we're making. So here we go. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook. So that's the first one. We're going to skip it. We're going to work a single crochet into the second chain. You're going to work a single crochet into each of the next 4 chains as well. So you'll have 5 single crochet. You should have 5 single crochet into the next 5 chains, and make sure you haven't twisted your foundation chain row. You're going to work a half double crochet. So a half double crochet into each of the next 5 chains. All right, so far we have 5 single crochet, 5 half double crochet, and into each of the last 5 chains, you're going to work a double crochet. So 1 double crochet into each of the remaining 5 chains. At the end of row 1 of your tree trunk, you should have 5 single crochet, 5 half double crochet, and 5 double crochet, so a total of 15 stitches. We're going to chain 2. This chain 2 will count as a double crochet. We're going to flip over our tree, and this first stitch, so this first one here, you can see the space right there, it's already accounted for because we're going to use our chain 2 as a double crochet. So get to the next stitch. So you're going to work a double crochet into the next stitch, and you're going to work a double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches as well. So you're going to have a double crochet sitting opposite each of the double crochets from the row before. So including the chain 2 that we turned with, that's 5 double crochets. We have 5 half double crochets to work across now. So if you're just working the plain trunk without the limb, you're going to work a half double crochet into each of those 5 stitches. If you want to make the little tree trunk with the limb, you're going to work a half double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, like I am right now. So everybody works a half double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. If you're not working the limb, then just continue, work a half double crochet into the next stitch. If you want to add the little limb, you're going to chain 4. You're going to skip the first chain from the hook and slip stitch back into those other 3 chains. So into the second chain from the hook, into the third chain from the hook, and the last chain that you made. And there's that next stitch. So if you didn't add the limb, you're just half double crocheting into that. If you did add the limb, you just half double crochet into that. So basically the only difference is that you're pausing to add the little limb or not. So that's all the half double crochets taken care of, and we've added a limb. The last 5 stitches are all single crochets, and you're going to single crochet into each of them. That is 15 stitches at the end of row 2 if you're making a regular trunk. If you're making the trunk with the limb, that's 15 stitches plus a little limb that is 3 slip stitches long. So there you go. You're going to do the same thing as you did with the tree top. You're going to leave yourself a nice long tail for sewing, because we're going to sew our tree tops with the tree top colors and our tree bottoms with the tree bottom colors. Fasten off. Grab your yarn needle. You want to weave in that little short tail. So you can weave it in on either side. It just depends on what side you want facing up, and that's if you want your little limb on the left or the right. Doesn't really matter. But don't fret it too much. Just make sure that little tail gets woven in and it'll disappear. Now we want to grab our actual blankets. So you're going to fold it so that you're looking at the main space between the top green section and the top blue section. If I pull it just to the left a little bit, you can see that's where we put our sun. So the green section starts to fall down beneath the sun, and we want the higher section over here. So you want to fold your blanket so that you've got, here's the edge right here. It's just about off, just a little off camera. You want to be looking at this section right here, the top of our green pasture. I have made 7 tree tops and 7 tree bottoms, and I'm going to start laying them all out here across the top of the green section so that they overlap both the green and the blue section. Now you can make a couple more trees if you want. It depends on how close together you want your trees. As we sew them down, today's tutorial is also going to teach you a little bit about overlapping applique and how that looks. Now we're going to lay our trees down in a pleasing staggered sort of design. If I pull it to the left, the top step of the green section is just after my last tree. So your last tree should be just inside from that top step of the green. And if I pull it to the right, you'll see the edge of the blanket. The edge of your tree should be just touching the stitch that's one in from the very edge of the blanket. Now I haven't pinned down any of my trees, so they're going to move around a little bit. You want your tree trunks to be overlapping the line between the green and the blue. And as you can see, I've sort of started with one, gone down a couple, gone back up a couple, gone down one, gone up one. So sort of a nice sort of staggered tree line. Then you want to lay all of your tree tops down on top. You're going to be touching or overlapping your tree tops, and when it comes time to sew them, we're going to be sewing some across the top and some underneath. So if you've got like one like this one, I happen to really like the way this chunky dark green tree top turned out, you might want that one up on top of everything. So take some time, lay out all of your tree tops. If you've got a whole bunch of different tree top colors, decide maybe how you want them dispersed across your blanket, and really enjoy the process of deciding how you want your forest to look. Once you feel that you've got them in a position you like, you can lay them flat and leave them there if you're working on a flat surface like I am, or you can pin them into place so they don't move on you. The first one I will be sewing down will be this tree completely, because I want this particular tree top to be underneath the other two tree tops on either side of it. But first I'm going to do the trunks. Now none of the trunks should be touching, so it's kind of easy to sew down your trunks first and then worry about your trees later. I've got all of my pieces pinned into place, so they shouldn't move around too much on me. I can kind of peel back the pieces that might be in the way. I thread up the long tail that's left on my trunk, and just like we did for the sunshine when we sewed that applique on, all you're going to do is pick up a piece of a stitch on the top of your blanket. So a piece of a stitch on the top of your blanket and the corresponding stitch on your tree. You're going to use top facing loops on your blanket stitches, and this will keep everything from showing through to the back. So I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit more so you can see what I'm doing. So you grab a piece of a stitch of the blanket and the corresponding stitch along the side or the edge of the applique piece that you're sewing down. And you're just going to work your way all the way around the entire outside edge of your trunk piece and for every single piece. And once you have a piece sewn down, you can make a little knot at the edge and weave your tail back in. And once I've got that piece sewn down, I'll show you what that looks like. I've got the whole trunk sewn down now all the way around the edge, picking up the top loops of the blanket. So if I flip it over, you'll see that there are no stitches showing through to the back. I've removed my pin. It's a good thing to remind yourself to remove your pins as you go so that you don't accidentally hurt yourself down the road. And now we're just going to make a little knot at the edge. So you can just pick up a piece of either the applique or even the blanket at this point. It doesn't matter because the top of your trunks are going to be hidden underneath the tops or just the bottoms of your tree tops. Make a little loop with your yarn and then bring your yarn needle from back to front through it, just to make a simple little knot. Pull it nice and tight, and then you can weave your tail back and forth through the tops of the stitches here of your tree trunk, and because your tail is the same color as your tree trunk, it won't show. You can go ahead and sew down all of your tree trunks if they're in a position that you like, and then worry about sewing down all the tree tops, or you can sew them down one tree at a time. The tree that you want to start with, though, is the tree that has its top piece completely against the blanket. So I have a piece of tree that is that the whole tree top is against the blanket, every other one. So I've positioned every other tree to be layered over top of those ones. So I want to make sure I sew down those trees first, because these tree pieces are going to be sewn down over top of the other ones. And as soon as I get around to sewing over top of a piece of an applique, I'll show you what that looks like when you get to it. Whether you're sewing over top of a trunk, because all of our tree tops overlap our little tree trunk a bit at the top, whether you're overlapping that or you're overlapping a piece of a tree top over another one, when you get to the part where you're sewing over top of the existing applique, you don't have to worry about the blanket. You're just now picking up a piece of the top of the applique and the corresponding piece of the applique that you're sewing down. So you don't have to go all the way down and grab a piece of the blanket. You're just grabbing the top facing loop of the already sewn down applique piece. And that will make your top part sit flat over top of the bottom part, and it'll give some really neat texture to your blanket. All of my pieces are now sewn down, so I can show you kind of what it looks like as they overlap each other. So that's sort of a piece of a tree overlapping another one. All of the tree tops overlap the tree trunk tops, so the bottoms of the trees, all of the sort of the leafy green parts are sort of sitting up on top. And that's how they look, all sewn down. And there you go, a forest. Now remember, you don't have to rush through this part of the project, or really any parts. You have the whole month, so take your time, enjoy the process, and have fun laying them all out. That's one of my favorite parts when I put together something like a blanket with a bunch of different appliques on it. I like fiddling around with how they look, changing around where I have the colors. It's just kind of part of the design process. And remember, it's your blanket, so make it your own. That's it for this week, everybody. We hope you enjoyed making an entire forest along with us today, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.